Welcome to the Let's Go Recovery podcast, where we investigate sobriety and beyond that, explore solutions to help us heal at the core, where the root of our problems like addiction or alcoholism begin. We hope you hear something in today's podcast that ignites a change in your life. I'm here today with writer, keynote speaker, advocate for human connection, and my favorite self-proclaimed slayer of loneliness, the author of 52 New Friends. Welcome to the set, Erica McBeth.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. You know, when I heard about your project and then obviously I've got to take part in some of what you did, I just had to have you on because it's such a great story of human connection. As you know, our motto kind of has that tied into it. It's the opposite of addiction's connection, human connection, and how important that is. Tell me a little bit about how you got started on that journey with writing a book, 52 New Friends, and what does that look like?
Oh, okay. So really, it came from a place of desperation. Let's just be honest with you. Most people don't know it by looking at me, but I've suffered with depression on and off throughout my entire life. It's just something that I kind of live with. And so 2017 was a really bad year for me. I had some health challenges. I had just gotten this new job that I thought was going to be so easy and lucrative that really wasn't. I had my heart broken. There were all these things that were going on, and I just found myself kind of in that low place. But because I've done this my whole entire life, and I kind of know that that's where, what happens when I get into that place, I started really looking externally and saying, okay, well, I need to bring more people into my life. How am I going to do that? So really where it started was my friend Katie had a brother who had died by suicide maybe the year before. And I heard about this suicide walk being done in downtown Phoenix. So probably in a desperate attempt to just kind of get her attention a little bit, I invited her to go. Totally didn't understand what an emotional impact that was going to have on her, but it also changed my life forever, because when I went down there, I never personally been impacted by a suicide death. And I got down there that day and there were 2,000 people in the park. And I was just floored because I was like, whoa, I had no idea that this was this big a type of issue. And so I started thinking about it. And as I'm sitting in the middle of the crowd, I just start realizing that every single person there had been touched by a death that was probably brought on by sadness and loneliness and depression. And I thought in my head, kind of like how I've been feeling. Mm-hmm. And I was just moved with this thing of, I just want to do something about this. What can I do? And so, if I'd probably been smart, I probably would have gone to the organization that put it on and said, how can I help?
Right.
And of course, I didn't do that. I was like, well, what am I going to do personally? Right. It has to be done with me. And so I just decided that in 2018, I was going to set my New Year's resolution to meet one new person I didn't know every single week for a year and sit down and have a conversation with them. And so that is how I came up with the concept of 52 New Friends. But I kind of had this idea that I was going to have to wander through coffee shops eventually, begging people to talk to me. So I was like, I got to have something that makes me look legitimate, right? What if I put together a blog and I just write a little something about each person I met? Then that makes me legitimate, right? And then people will be more likely to talk to me because I won't be like a crazy lady. And so I started at the very beginning just writing a little snippet about each person I met. And it wasn't until about halfway through, I was like, you know what? I think I'm writing a book. And I told a friend of mine, and he said, oh, you didn't know that was what you were doing? Right. We thought you were doing that all along. So that's kind of how the whole project came about and started.
That's super interesting. And I got to get the 52-week correlation, so that makes it, and it's obviously a pronounced thing. But I think I read something about you that said that something transformed within you halfway through the writing of this, what you didn't know was to be a book. But now it's a book. Now it's kind of taken the shape of this 52 New Friends. What happens to Erica in the midst of writing that book?
Yeah, and see, this is the part that you don't catch in the book. I feel like there's another book in me brewing somewhere. It just hasn't come to fruition yet. But really what happened was it started to change me from the inside. I could feel it right here. And I know that sounds crazy, But I could literally feel myself changing right there. And people later have told me that there's like a chakra there, or that some religions think it's a religious place. I don't know anything about any of that. I just know that I felt different starting here. And about 3 months into the project, like the depression I'd had all throughout 2017 completely went away. It was just completely gone. And about 6 months in, I was like, there's something to this. I don't know what it is, but there's something here. And by about 9 months in, I was like, this thing was life-changing. I just literally changed my life. And it's kind of been since that project that it's taken shape. And now I have more of a voice onto how it changed me. But in the moment, I could just feel like I was changing. I didn't know what was happening.
That's super wonderful to hear, like just to be part of something. I like to say that you have two choices every single day. You can either get wrapped up in yourself, or you can pour into others. In your case, you probably were sitting there hearing your story in a different manner, right? And like, so we can say like the behavior or the problem might be different, but people's reaction to it typically are loneliness, right? No one understands, like, I don't know how to get through this. And when we talk about things like suicide as the ultimate like choice, right? Somebody says, this is the best option. It hurts me because I know there's somebody probably that sat right where they sat and thought, maybe I should. And you talked about picking up the phone. Like that's the hardest thing to do, talking to a friend. And you're going out there meeting people. Tell me a couple of the stories. Tell me a couple of the quick snippets from the book where I go, wow, that's got to be amazing to be part of.
Yeah, so like pretty early on, I had a coworker that she said, you know, my mother is just going through cancer. I think she could use a new friend. And I was like, she was like, could she be part of the project? And I was like, absolutely, I would love that. So I sat down with this lady for coffee. Like she's just starting to kind of get back on her feet. She's starting to feel better. And like in my head, I always kind of came to the table with some open-ended questions so that we can kind of let the conversation flow. And so I thought that we were going to talk a lot about cancer. So my first question when I sat down with her was, how has cancer changed your life? And she went, to be honest with you, not at all. And I went, okay, well, that seems different. And I was like, and she said, well, honey, listen, I'm 70 years old. These things just happen. And I was like, that is just such a relaxed way of looking at your own mortality. And I said, where does that come from? I mean, are you spiritual? Are you religious? You know, are you a positive thinker? Have you always been that way? Like, where does that come from? And she thought about it for a second and she went, well, I think it's because I'm a witch. And you don't leave me speechless very often, but that one just about knocked me out of my chair. Because I literally was like, give me a second while I process that. I'm sure I'm going to have lots of questions. And so, I mean, that was one that I definitely remembered because she talked for the rest of the time about like how she was a witch. And I was like, well, I've never met a witch before, so this is interesting. Right. And also, I know your daughter. Could she have not given me a heads up? Like, I had no idea that I was walking in that.
Blindsided if I am a witch.
Yeah, but people told me like all kinds of different things. There were a lot of times people told me very, very personal things that I didn't feel like they were necessarily part of a story. And so I left them out because I was like, I don't feel like this is really part of a story. But I heard a lot of people talk about, I mean, not a lot, there were probably a handful that told me how they had been molested or different things, like really horrific things that they had been through that maybe weren't part of their overall story. But I'm like, you don't know me from Adam, and this is what you're just telling me this, you're being this open with me. And it was in those moments that it kind of hit me. If you sit down and talk to a stranger, you don't have anything to like worry about, because if you're talking to someone you know, they might judge you. And if you care about them, you care about what they think. But if they're a stranger, they could leave tomorrow and you might never hear from them again. So you can feel a little more open and freeing to talk to them because they're not going to necessarily judge you in a way that's going to hurt you. And in a way, it's kind of like therapy a little bit.
I would think that that's exactly what it is. It's like, I can tell you some things, and if we say therapy, if I go sit with a therapist, we don't want their input to be predicated upon something that they know about us, right? Like, oh yeah, I know that about you. I want you to kind of have a fresh slate So as I take that before somebody, they can kind of make choices based on, this is what I'm hearing. Do you want to do that? That's the beautiful part about recovery, is that somebody has probably been where they are, whether or not they know it, right? Whether or not they experience just saying some of that stuff out loud and being able to say, I understand and I hear you, is a beautiful opportunity for you. I bet that had to be kind of like crazy, but also like, wow, like you're sharing something with me that I guarantee is super personal.
Oh yeah, and I mean, some of them that you could tell they held onto it for a long time, and maybe when it escaped their lips, and when I say, I don't think that this is as uncommon as you think it is. I've heard this before. Some of those statements, like you just feel relief, just like come across people because they said it and somebody didn't judge them, and then they could feel like, okay, I can be a little bit more of myself. And so, I don't want people getting the wrong idea thinking I'm an actual therapist. Right. I am not an actual therapist. Right. I have not been trained for that. Sure. But I am a good listener.
Right. I think that's a huge benefit, right? Being able to sit down again in this particular situation. But now I know about you that you sit on the Arizona chapter of the Suicide Prevention Board.
So the Arizona chapter of the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. So the proceeds of 52 New Friends, the book, all go back to them because they were the ones that were putting on the event that day. Wow. And I just felt like that was the right thing to do. So when I said to them, hey, I'm writing this book, I'm going to send all the proceeds to you, they were like, oh, well, tell us more. Maybe you should be on our board.
Great.
And so that's how I got on the board. And they were like, oh, and wait, you have a marketing background? Because we could definitely use somebody that has those talents. And so that's kind of how I got involved with them. But it's been a great experience because the research that they provide, they give away for free. So a lot of this donation money that people give them, they put into the actual research. It's their research on why we can have conversations about suicide now, when we used to not be able to have this 20, 25, 30 years ago. But a lot of that has been done because of the research that was put out and given away for free. Now we know things about suicide that we never used to know before.
Right. I read something just before the show that said that in 2023, suicide reached its all-time high in the United States of America. It was over 57,000 deaths by suicide, and those were the ones that they were able to track. I don't know if they put accidental overdoses in there or forced overdoses that had some question marks to it. So
right.
Those statistics are kind of skewed. But what do you think about that correlation between what we're doing at Let's Go Recovery, which was helping people fight addictions and alcoholism, drug problems of any kind? What do you think that correlation looks like when we start talking about suicide and recovery and how they can work together?
Well, I mean, they definitely overlap. Suicide is an incredibly complex issue, so I'd have to say that first. But they definitely overlap for sure because, from my understanding of why someone would first start using would be to mask mental health problems. And it could be anxiety, depression, bipolar, schizophrenia. There's a whole slew of different types of mental health conditions that people use alcohol and drugs to mask.
Sure.
And so, if you're looking at that combination and you're kind of seeing it all the way through, we know, for example, that when you really get heavy into your addiction and your life becomes only about your addiction, things fall apart. And then you have a tendency to get very depressed because your life is falling apart and you feel like you were not in control of the situation anymore. And so when you're looking at that, there are an awful lot of deaths out there that people are like, well, is this an accidental overdose or is it suicide? Sometimes it's a little hard to tell.
I've actually worked a lot in rooms where people say, I took enough that I thought maybe I wouldn't wake up again. My heart race. I have one of my favorite, I'll say, sponsees right now has said, every day I woke up was a little bit pissed because of that. I just wanted this to be over.
Yeah.
And you go, man, that's sad to think that people get there and they're not maybe strong enough or have mentally get in a spot where they go I'm going to do it. But all of their heart, all of their soul is kind of being ripped out of them a little bit every day and going, if it happens,
I'm okay with it. Like if I don't wake up and I go, man, when did that start? And it started with just a hurt. You talked about some of the people in your book that were, I'm going to use, sexual misfortune. I'll say, if I can use that language, like whatever happened to them, molestation, they use that and like they've carried that hurt around for an extended period of time. And I know that talking to you certainly helps, but what do we say to the person that's carrying around something, whatever that is, that you can let that go? And it's not necessarily with Erica or Tracy, but somebody you need to heal. What do you say to that person?
I mean, I think they want to put it down. They want to let it go. But in order to like let it go, you have to like get it out. And you have to like have people around you that you trust. I mean, to the people that I'm thinking that said something like that to me in the book while I was doing that project, they're the most amazing people you could possibly meet. Mm-hmm. And one of them, she and I have become incredibly close over the years, because about a third of them I'm still in contact with. But she has told me upon occasion, she said, man, you just walked into my life like a bull in a china shop. I didn't even know what hit me. I didn't expect to like meet somebody that I felt like I could let my guard down and really just truly talk to. But she was like, honestly, like, I'm so glad that you did, because I needed that. And she's probably one of the dearest people in my life. I kind of joke around because I'm like, if the chips were down, she'd be the first person to show up for me. I know, but that's that relationship that we have built over time. But it started with the project. Sure. She didn't even know what she was getting into. She was like, at the end of it, she was like, wait, you're going to write something about this? This is a book? Like, what did I just do? Right. But she said, you helped to restore the belief for me that there are good people out there.
Right. And quite frankly, she's one of them. Like that's the best part is she's not defined by the sum of all of her experiences, good or bad. Too many people get caught up in like, well, this happened to me. I guarantee that if we went to most larger groups of people and we started going like, hey, is this part of your story? Divorce, abandonment, sexual abuse, drugs, alcohol. Like, there's very few people sitting down if I ask them to stand up as like I mentioned your thing. You look around and go like, hey, you've been through it. We've been through it, right? And so that opportunity, not just writing a book, but being part of somebody's journey is beautiful because now you get to tell me, like, I have a friend that had this happen to them, and then they were able to move on. I have a dear friend in recovery, and she has a similar story. When she stands in front of a group of people and says, this happened to me, I can tell there's people that are going, wow, like you can say that today? And I don't think that necessarily anyone leads with that, right? I'm the this, I'm the that, right? But all of a sudden, I start taking that power away from this incident, this traumatic, awful experience, and take away some of the guilt and shame that I'm riddled with, because every time I say it, it becomes a little less powerful, a little less painful. Yeah. How does that feel when I say something like that?
I mean, it definitely resonates with me for sure. Like, because, I talk a lot, about my experiences with depression, mainly because a lot of times I think people look at me and they think, oh wow, she's got it all together. I do not have it all together. Like, if you guys saw the chaos like behind everything, I do not have it all together. And so I think people need to know that, because we live in this instant gratification Instagram world where we're looking at people and we're thinking, oh man, look how great their life looks. Looks don't mean anything to like what is actually going on the inside. And I really feel like a lot of us are suffering in silence because we feel like it's only me, it's just me. And that's just not the case.
I want to go to that statement you just said, suffering in silence. That's a weighted statement, and I think it obviously resonates with people in addiction. We had, COVID had a rampant effect on addiction. I know a lot of people that picked up a substance because they were lonely, or in a behavior can start when I'm at home, like I used to just drink on the weekends, and now like I'm at home every day, and I'll drink at 3 o'clock because like what else am I going to do? I'll use this narcotic because I don't have to drive. Like it's not that big of a deal, and all of a sudden it's got its grips on you, right? And all of a sudden it's sunk in, and then I'm just left to my silence. I'm left to my loneliness. He said, slayer of loneliness. I love that language, by the way. But tell me a little bit about that, where I break out of, I don't have to be silent, not just in coming to you or to somebody else in my story, but coming to anyone that can say either me too or have you tried. Talk to me about that, a little bit of that transition.
I mean, like, I think early on in life, I had the mother that was always like, don't talk about that. We're not going to talk about that. Yeah. And I kind of realized very early on that if I just said the obvious thing that we all knew was happening, but nobody wanted to talk about it, when you say that obvious thing, it doesn't hold power to you anymore. Mm-hmm. And so just by saying, okay, well, here's this obvious thing, I'm not going to feel ashamed about it. Inevitably, whenever I've done something, particularly when it hurts, and I'm like, I don't know whether I should have just revealed that weirdness about myself, inevitably somebody comes to me and says, no, I felt that same way, I just didn't have the courage to say it. So that it's kind of given me the power my entire life to be like, okay, well, I'm going to be the one that says the weird thing, because it helps other people, because I'm probably like, I think I'm the weirdo, and I'm like, just me. And in fact, I won't get into like the gory details, but last week I was with a group of friends. We're all kind of like 50s, 60s, late 40s. So we're all kind of going through the same kind of change in life. And I sat down and I said something that was really bothering me that day. And the whole table just erupted. Well, then this is what's going on with me. And we had the most open conversation about women in menopause that I think we've ever had. I felt really sorry for the people like at the tables next to us, but because we were loud and like it was our truth, and we were all talking to our truth, but we were talking to the truth that nobody else wants to hear. Right. And so, like, just to be like that, like if you're thinking it, sometimes it's best to just like speak it, because that puts it out there. And when you speak it, you speak your truth. It releases that truth and gives you power. But I think that also like holding it inside is also equally damaging, because the longer you leave it on the inside, the harder it is to like get it out. And I do believe that it does things to your brain and your body. I think it causes illness. I think it does a lot of really bad things. But more importantly, most of the time when you're not speaking your truth, emotions don't come with labels. So like you may be feeling something for a really long time and not know what it is. I was feeling that depression for a really long time till a therapist said, oh, this is depression. And I went, what?
Right.
I didn't know that was depression. And then you start to like feel it and you're like, oh, that's what that is. And when you have a label, you can put on an emotion. Then you can start to do the steps to make that dissipate. Right. But you can't do that until you label the emotion. And some of us just have emotions, we don't know what they are.
Right? That's the scary part, is I'm carrying around something, I don't even know what it is, but I figure out a way to protect it, right? Yeah. I think that if we talk to alcoholics and addicts and people that struggle with addiction of any kind, I guarantee there was this kind of holding in compression, like we've hold it in, but we also build these barriers. And I'm going to say masks. I like using that because I was a mask wearer. Like I'll show up at that place and you'll think everything's okay. I've had people say things like, you know, my wife said, well, I wish you were more like Tracy. And I'm broken, right? I'm hurting. I'm going home using drugs and alcohol because I don't want to deal with my life, right? And I'm going, oh, that's crazy. What you saw and what was going on. I got really, really good at wearing that mask, which also is super hard to break through because I put a mask on top of a mask, on top of another layer, and then I don't have to even feel that or know that. You talked a little bit in a keynote speech that you gave, a little bit about the idea of you were a long way down the road before you even realized that something that happened when you were 10 years old. Like, so now you're significantly, you know, I'm not gonna say significantly, we're not talking about age on this show. I know, I've got a range now though, you've given me ammo. But the reality is this, like you're down the road and you just buried it, hidden it, ran from it, whatever it is. Tell me a little bit about that discovery journey where you realize, oh wow, somebody put a name to it, now I know what you're talking about.
So when I was 10 years old, I went through this, you know, my family would call it like a spell. And I was just massively depressed. I was very sad. I was crying every day. I was 10 years old. And I remember in my head, I would go out and I would sit underneath this tree with my dog and I would just stare out for hours. And that's not normal for a 10-year-old. And, you know, my parents, they were small town people. I don't think they really knew what to do with that. And so they didn't know what to do, but eventually I snapped out of it and they were like, okay, good. Things are okay. These are just growing pains. Like she just snapped out of it. But that was the first time I had an experience with depression. And so that would kind of like come in and out of my life. It wasn't until I was in my mid-20s that somebody actually put that label on it and said, this is depression. And I went, wait, what? And I was like, well, where did this come from? Nobody else in my family suffers from it. I have, you know, like, I don't know where this comes from, but I just now know this is this thing that I have to carry around with me for the rest of my life. And by the way, my whole family told me I was crazy and like, oh, crazy, you're crazy. You should go back to therapy, like all of these things. But here's the kicker. Probably about 4 or 5 years ago, I was talking to a cousin of mine and she said, well, you know, she was actually worried about my brother because he was going through a depressive episode. And like, I just fell into that. And I was like, wait, I thought I was the only one. How, you have that too? Like, I thought I was just the crazy one. It's not me. And my cousin said, yeah, well, you know, I'm really worried about him because, you know, our grandmother, she was institutionalized for depression twice. And not just depression, catatonic depression. Mm-hmm. And I went, wait, what are you talking about? I've never even heard of this. And I said, when did these episodes happen? And she said, well, once when our parents were really, really young, your dad was probably just a baby. And the second time was probably sometime in the 80s. And I went, whoa, in the 80s? I was like, I was living across the street from her in the 80s. And I did not know this was happening. Not only that, but that was probably about the same time I was getting my first depressive episodes. And nobody put the two together. And I was like, this is 4 or 5 years ago I'm hearing about this. And I'm like, this is the power of what people are not talking about.
As you start talking about it, you start to heal. Like you go on a healing journey yourself. And I want to jump into the piece. You talk about an advocate for human connection. Of course, I love that. I use that language a lot. Talk to me about what happens when not just we get it out there in words, but when we start doing battle together. I like using that kind of imagery. Like I've had a team, right? Like I'm telling you this thing, and then you go, well, no big deal. Like, hey, I had this happen to me, and again, we talk about anything from somebody's past, and say, oh, that's ugly. That's not going to scare me away, right? Like I get it. And you start kind of looking at that. I guarantee that friend you're telling me about, you can tell her, man, I've met another woman, and her heart breaks a little bit, but she says, maybe I have some remedy, maybe I have some solution. How does the human connection part of your advocacy come into changing people's life because of another person's experience?
Well, I mean, I think I'm just a great connector of people now. I get all kinds of random calls from like, hey, do you know like a contractor to like do something on my house, or to, hey, do you know somebody that might be looking for a job? Like I get all kinds of weird calls because people are like, oh, she just knows a lot of people. And I do know a lot of people, but I don't know everyone on the planet. And at this point, like I've made so many new friends, sometimes it's hard to keep up with everybody. So thank God for social media. Like you see like what's happening in other people's lives, sort of. But you know, you have enough of a connection with people, but you just feel like you have more of a community. And I think that's what a lot of us are lacking, because we forget that human beings were originally pack animals. Like when we came out to, you know, hunt and gather and build farms and all of these things, we gathered in communities so that we could protect one another. And now technology has kind of tricked us into believing that we can do everything on our own. And that is absolutely not the case. We still need a village of people that care about us in order to be able to get us through this life. Because you can be a very strong person, but even the strongest people break sometimes. And when you break, you need to have someone there that is, you know, your champion, that is willing to pick you up. And I feel like, you know, the group of people that I have close to me that are really close, and there are not a ton of them, but they're the people that I would trust with my life. And those are the people that are like, all right, Erica's a little broken. Let's pick her back up. And those are the people that I call, and they show up. And I don't think people really realize just the power of just showing up. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to say anything. Just do what you say you're going to do and show up. Because we're so worried and concerned about like how other people view us that we forget that we need to be there for other people too. And that being there for other people kind of takes us away from our own kind of selfish ways to say, like, I hate to use the word selfish. I don't like that word, but like just take us away from all of the me, I. And when we start to care about people, we start to look at the world kind of broader outside of us. And when you're focusing on that and you're not thinking me, it changes the way you view things. That's how I deal with my own depression. Is if I know I'm in the me, and I'm so focused on myself, what I really need to do is turn my attention externally and say, okay, well, can I help somebody else? Because if I'm more worried about them than I am about myself, guess what? My own problems don't seem that bad anymore.
You dissipate. Sure
You dissipate.
That's great language. I love all of that because I know in my own life, those people, and I love that you said it's a small group of people that are going to show up. There's so much importance there. The best part is that oftentimes you're the one rewarded. Like when you go write the book, I could see some sort of like, wow, this is going to be Erica's like prized possession. This is going to be something that she gets to be part of. But in reality, it's 52 different people that get to be impacted by you. Right? That's kind of what when I read the book, when I look at these stories, I start seeing things like, wow, Erica got to play front row seat to some amazing stuff. But it changes Erica as much as it, if not, changes that person's thought about who they are.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that, when you get to see the light bulb come on.
I mean, I don't know that there's a light bulb that come on because I didn't come in, like, the beautiful thing about this project, I didn't come with an agenda.
Okay.
So there was no agenda. Like, I was just like, hey, I'm here. I'll talk about whatever you want to talk about. Like, whatever you want to talk about, we'll talk about it. And we had an amazing in-depth conversations with some people, and some people, like, it didn't really kind of go that deep. And, and that's okay. Everybody had their different experience. So I don't think anybody ever really had, like, the light bulb that went off, but they all felt like they were part of something. They felt like they were part of something, and I truly wanted it to be part of something for them. It never occurred to me that I was going to get enormous benefits from that, because here's what it did for me. So when 2020 came through, okay, like everybody in 2020 was worried about one another because people were melting down in their house and they were like, depression is rampant, drug use is up, oh my gosh, the sky is falling. I was kind of surprised by all that because I'm just sitting in my house by myself with my dogs, my cat, and like I'm by myself. And if anybody should have been worried about someone, you should have been worried about me, because I have told people that I have depression. I've told people that I am like a people person, and now I am by myself alone in my house. People should have worried about me, and I was actually okay. And I was like, this is really weird that I'm okay. But I actually am okay. But it's really weird that I'm okay. And I think that project changed me, that I had these deep connection roots that flowed into the earth. And so the winds of change, when they came blowing, it knocked over people with shallower roots. But my roots at that point were so deep. And that is the thing that makes the change. It's not the thing that happened on the outside, but it's the thing that happened on the inside.
I had to sit with that for a minute. That's pretty powerful stuff. I can't wait for that to go viral. That's pretty great thought, and the imagery of that is a kind of an internal project. So many things that you talked about are external forces, right? Again, a divorce, a behavior somebody kind of threw at you, or lost a job. There's just so many things that we can, being deaths, all these sorts of things. They're external forces, but as you don't internalize them, right? So I don't take that in as, again, I'm alone. Like, no, I'm going to call my friend and tell him that I just lost my mom. Or, hey, this marriage is ending in divorce, which, by the way, over 50% of them are ending in divorce. So it's not as though you're alone, right? So these sorts of things that happen to us don't have to be here. If I let them out, then I can grow stronger in who I really am. who I really am is not abandoned kid or divorced or a father of this or that situation. It's so many more things that I get to root myself in. Finish me off with just some of the thoughts that you can give to my audience that says who you are, what you want them to be, just some encouragement towards that next version of themselves.
I mean, so the way that this really changed me is I feel like, I mean, I've been in marketing and advertising forever, but what I realized during the project, I was like, oh, what I've really mastered is this art of word of mouth advertising, because that's basically what it is. And now I can kind of feel and see exactly like how it works in a way that I've never really been able to see before. And what that changed in me is I was like, listen, when you give of yourself, truly, not for any purpose, but just truly to give of yourself to other human beings, and you're really working to make this a better world, like it makes you feel like it makes you feel like you have more control over your life. You know, I have control over nothing. Like anything could happen tomorrow, I have control over nothing. But it does make you feel more powerful, like you actually have something and you're connected with everybody else. So in those moments, and listen, we all have them when we think, oh, this is terrible, like, you know, maybe I should think about, taking my own life. If somebody is thinking that, they're not going to think that so readily if they have a group of people around them that really love them and they can feel that love flowing in between one another. Because when you have that, instead of being all about me and my problems, you look at it externally and go, well, now I have a community that cares about me. How could I do that to them? Because now I'm taking this big patchwork quilt being created, and that would rip something right out in the middle. And what was that to them? They would never be the same. How would I do that to them?
There's so much power in that. I thank you so much for being here. We're going to put a link on the end of this podcast or right below. Somebody can get your book, 52 New Friends. You can find it on Amazon. I think is the best place to do it. What I heard from Erica today was find your people. Who is going to be there for you on your worst days? Remember to find them. Pick up that phone. Call them. Suicide is not necessarily the answer to anybody's story. It will never be how you want to be remembered. It's impacting others way more than it's impacting yourself. So find somebody that can help you, and possibly you can help.
I hope you heard something today that gets you to take one small step into the version of the person that you want to be. For more content like this, subscribe to our channel below, or you can go on letsgorecovery.org. Until next time,